All right, welcome one and all. It is 6:06. I'm calling this meeting to order. Hello. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Dorsland,
Here.
N.H. Theronot, Wiggs, Wilson, Harris,
Here.
Cagle, Carter, Cowart, Crane, Esri, Farney,
Here.
Fava, Portado, Hanauer Friedman,
Here.
Lockshin,
Here.
Pugh,
Present.
Rodriguez, Rogers,
Present.
Settles, Sexton, Solard,
Here.
Locke.
Here. All right, we don't even need a quorum tonight, but thank you all for coming. Will the clerk please read the notice of meeting?
Notice is hereby given that a study session of the Champaign County Board of the County Board, Champaign County, Illinois, will convene on January 27, 2026, 6 p.m. in the Shields Carter Meeting Room, Bennett Administrative Center, 104 East Main Street, Urbana, Illinois, in said county for purpose of reviewing county finances.
Thank you. All right, moving on. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Mr. Thorsland, seconded by Sullard. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have an agenda. Public participation. First up, Susan Monty.
I'm Susan Monty, former county employee and founder and executive director of Champaign County Environmental Stewards. My request this evening is that the county administration and the county board address the long-standing need to allocate and sustain a basic level of funding to be used to implement the Champaign County Solid Waste Management Plan. The County Solid Waste Fund was established back in 1989, and since then, the county has steadily spent down this fund. The primary revenue sources to this fund come from licenses, waste hauler licensure, and in more recent years, support received from certain villages that step up to help meet costs of countywide collection events held, such as the twice-a-year countywide residential electronics collections. Each Champaign County budget since at least 2014 has acknowledged that the county solid waste fund balance will consistently be used each year as available revenue for initiatives such as the countywide residential electronics collection events and annual Illinois EPA one-day household hazardous waste collection events until the fund balance is completely spent. As the revenue to expenditure deficit trend continues, each budget since then has stated over time another revenue source will need to be identified to continue funding these events. Several of you are aware that in Illinois, it is the counties that are assigned the authority and responsibility for solid waste management planning. For practical purposes, this is largely an unfunded state mandate. The state legislation requires Champaign County have a recycling program that is implemented through the county, and that the county designate a recycling coordinator to administer the program. Here in Champaign County, an example of one unaddressed solid waste planning need that continues is to improve recycling drop-off options for outlying rural residents. The 2022 update of the Champaign County Solid Waste Management Plan includes this and other recommendations to increased waste diversion. This evening, my objective is simply to draw public attention to this budget challenge. I have no specific suggestion to discuss at this time and would like to share my ideas about this with the county administrator sometime soon. I have compiled information about how solid waste management and recycling programs are structured and funded at 6 of the most comparable counties to Champaign County based on population. and we'll plan to share this with the county administrator. Thank you for holding this study session and for allowing public participation.
Thank you, Ms. Monte. Next up, we have Sanford Hess. While Mr. Hess approaches, I will let everyone on the board know you just received an email from me letting you know that we have slides that Mr. Hess has provided for the board to review. And then you have a second email where I actually attached them. Oops. But everyone does have a copy of your 3 slides, Mr. Hess, so whenever you're ready.
I've also placed a link to the slides on my website, my campaign website. So if you Google my name, Sanford Hess, and then find my campaign website, if you go there, there's a pop-up. This is for the public watching at home, that if you click on that pop-up, it'll take you to the images. But I first of all just want to appreciate the opportunity to speak and to have this evening. I really applaud the county board for beginning this process now. I do not envy the job that lies ahead for you this year, but I'm glad you're starting early. So kudos for that. What I want to share in my slides is some of the research that was done by one of our campaign interns. Juliana Gonzalez was the one who pulled this information together, and I just wanted to share the things that we learned about the county budget. Now, we did take the county budget overall. You could do the same analysis for just the general fund. You could do this analysis for any fund. But what I was really fascinated by was the growth over the last 20 years. I have the first chart that I show is the property tax revenues over the last 20 years, personnel costs, and services costs. And if you saw the lines, they go upwards, no surprise. But the real key was this. While the property tax essentially doubled in dollar amounts over 20 years, personnel increased only by 50%, while services more than tripled and almost quadrupled. So one of the goals that I'm trying to achieve with sharing this information is to say that if you want to look for places to cut from the budget, the services budget went from, and actually in 2006, services was $22.8 million and property tax was $21.9 million. So almost the same numbers. 20 years later, the property tax had gone up to $48.2 million. Services went up to $82 million. So my point in bringing these numbers to your attention is just to assist in showing, look, I'm from an IT background. I'm a consultant by trade. 2 of the ways that services money is being spent is consulting and IT services. In other words, software as a service. Those are areas that have gotten more and more expensive, yet are also areas that should be researched in terms of the spending. The third picture that I have is a graph showing underspending a budget. And I think this is really key, and this comes from having done this kind of analysis in the past. If you're looking for places to cut budget, it is useful to see who is not spending all the budget that they have. Generally, personnel costs have left on the table, so to speak, about 5% of budget. And especially now, services costs are more up and down, but in the 22, 23, and 24, each of those years we wound up with more than 10% of the services budget unspent. So my recommendation to you as you begin this difficult process of finding money to cut is to start looking for budget lines where people are not spending all their budget. I have one final comment on this, which is that I know that in the position changes that were just passed before County Board last week, the grants coordinator position, the funding was changed, and it is no longer out of the County Board budget after that position change was pushed through. So the County Board is now going to have some additional money in your own budget because you're not paying for the grants coordinator anymore. What a wonderful opportunity for the County Board to set a good example for departments by saying, look, we can cut our budget too. So I applaud the process that you're on. I will be here for the long haul in these meetings to have it with you, and I thank you for going down this journey.
Thank you, Mr. Hess. Seeing no further slips in front of me and only one member of the public, I see a hand raised. Mr. Ammons, would you like to join us for public comment? All right, just pass that on forward. Thank you.
Although I have a folder and a notebook, I don't have a lot of notes. I'm coming to you tonight as a department head, and I've had several conversations over the past couple of months with Ellie, with Board Member Friedman, Hanover Friedman, and some communications with Board Member Farney about budget questions and budget issues. So I came tonight, but I didn't know what to expect because I didn't receive any of the documents that you all have here that you have a chance to take a look at. As a department head being asked to potentially cut services or to cut personnel, it sure would be nice for us to get these documents ahead of time, to be able to peruse them, to see if we see anything in it that might be helpful. But I don't get those. And so it would be nice to have those documents. One of the questions that I've asked recently to other folks who have worked in finance, who have worked for the county, is, I've never really dug this deep into this, but what is a trial balance? I didn't know anything about that until recently. And the audit and how important that is. So I understand all the stuff that's been going on around the audit, whether or not it's going to be on time. And what also is important is what do you have at the end of the year? So I know as a department head, you all basically get the money back from us that we don't spend in the year, I think what Sanford was just talking about. And I think that's a part of the trial balance. But how do you know what projections or what forecasts you can have without a trial balance, without the audit being done? Can someone help me understand that? Maybe Travis?
We can't answer questions during public comment. You can stick around after.
So I would just like to see, get some answers to those questions. I send them in emails, but I don't get an answer. So maybe if I send an email directly to Travis, I'll get a response from Travis. But I've sent these types of questions, and I have not gotten very clear answers for those. So I would like to hear some of those answers this evening. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other slips in front of me, we can move on to board communications. Are there any communications from the board? Mr. Pugh?
Thank you. It's actually germane to this. Mr. Farney made a comment a few months ago about fees and whatnot, that probably couldn't raise them. He had mentioned raising the marriage license up to $100. And he seemed like that probably wouldn't be a thing, but I've actually talked to a lot of people. They thought it was that much or more already, and they're fine with that, it seems like. And this is from a very poor district. Just want to say that we could possibly be raising some fees also, too. Probably not in the courts, but other places. Thanks.
Any other communications from the board? All right, we'll move right along to our presentation. I will point out for our department heads that have joined us, we've got a lot of empty seats up here. If you'd like to come on up and join us, you'd have access to the papers that are on the desks. Just pick a board member to choose to be them and have a seat up here if you'd like, or you can sit in the corner if you'd like to stay there. Okay. Also, I'll be handing over control of this meeting to Finance Chair Hanover Friedman.
Okay, so we have a pretty short agenda, so to speak, but hopefully that will leave us with plenty of time for discussion and questions. This is really, the study session is an opportunity for the board and for those department heads who have joined us, thank you, to ask the questions that they have and to make sure that everybody has the information, particularly the board has the information that they need moving forward, since we will be needing to make some difficult decisions over the coming months. So we're going to start out with a brief presentation on the budget from Travis, and he will explain what these documents are in front of us. So I'm going to turn it over to Travis.
We're working to get the slides up on the thing. Just give me 1 second. Sorry about that. So good evening. I'll keep this pretty short. We've discussed this multiple times over the past couple of months, so this is more just a refresher with some updated numbers. You guys probably recognize this graph from a couple months ago. It's the general fund and public safety sales tax with estimated fund balances through 26. It also has the fund balance ratio calculation. And as a reminder, that is where you take the unrestricted fund balance and divide it by expenditures. County policy is to have a minimum fund balance ratio of 16.7%, while the goal is 25% based on discussions with financial advisors and GFOA worksheets. FY25 is projected to end at a 20.89% ratio, and 26 is projected at 20.62%. Had we not budgeted the public safety sales tax transfer for 26, the $1.8 million, the ratio would have dropped down to 17.17, which would have been just above policy. For reference, and I will mention this in a later slide, the FY24 fund balance ratio is projected at 27.7%. So it's quite a significant drop over the last couple of years. Reasons for significant changes to the fund balance are in 25, the hospital settlements were finalized. A separate opioid fund was created, so fund balance got moved out of the general fund into that since it's restricted on what it can be used for. In 2025, so far, there has been over $2.6 million in budget amendments passed in additional general fund expenditures, but only $186,000 in revenue. In 2025, $2 million was budgeted out of public safety sales tax instead of the general fund for CARF as a way to relieve some pressure from the general fund. And again, in 26, about $1.8 million of public safety sales tax is transferred to cover some public safety eligible expenses that would have historically been paid from the general fund. From 2019 to 2024, non-CARF related justice and public safety expenses have grown by about $5.4 million, while public safety sales tax revenue has only grown by about $1.8 million. I mentioned this a little bit ago. The general fund balance ratio is projected to drop from 27.7% at the end of 24 to 20.62% at the end of 26. If revenue and expenses continue at a similar pace, the ratio will be under policy in the next year or two, and the fund balance will be depleted around FY32. In order to get back to the goal of 25%, or even to prevent from dropping under policy, the county will need to increase revenue or decrease expenditures in the general fund. In 2021, there was a huge jump in general fund revenue, around $6 million. This helped to fix the budget issues and pad the fund balance in the general fund. This increase was due to three main things. The Level the Playing Field Act that was passed by Illinois, which assigned sales tax on a destination basis instead of an origination basis. This really benefited the county. It collected sales tax on where you ordered stuff. So if you order items online, it no longer went to the warehouse you ordered it from. It went to where the order was made from the sales tax. So Urbana or Champaign County benefited. Places with warehouses did not benefit. There was also a huge increase to income taxes because of the way COVID affected income taxes. And during COVID, there was extreme corporate profits. So PPRT had risen to historic levels. And I'm talking about like triple what we had historically gotten, maybe even more. However, over the last few years, this has gone back down. One, because corporate profits have started to kind of not be at historical levels anymore. And number two, the state realized that they had a error in their calculation. They have since corrected that, plus they are taking, clawing back money for the overpayments that they would have made over the years prior. So since 2021, general fund revenues have been growing slowly. As you can see on the chart, it's been a very flat increase, where expenses have been growing at a much faster rate. Again, this is just general fund, not all, the whole county. So unless there is a new act from the state of Illinois that helps to bail the general fund out, like the Level the Playing Field Act did a few years ago, the county will either need to raise revenues or reduce expenses to bring the revenue and expense growth rates back to being in line.
Any questions for Travis on everything he just shared? Travis, can you just remind everyone what PPRT is, since you mentioned that?
PPRT stands for Personal Property Replacement Taxes. I think it was in the 70s when the state, there used to be a personal property tax, and the state got rid of it, and they created PPRT as a replacement source for that tax.
Yes.
There's the slide that mentions that to get back to the goal of 25%, but there would have to be an increased revenue or reduce of expenditures. Is there any calculation of the amount of reduction that would be needed if that would be the case?
During the budget process, I had calculated something, and it was about, well, it was 6% if we did not use public safety sales tax to help offset stuff. And by using public safety sales tax, I believe it was like 2 or 3%.
Any other questions? Yeah, Mr. Farney.
Travis, in your second slide, you mentioned that from FY19 to FY24, non-CARF-related justice and public safety expenses have grown by 5.4 million, while the revenue for public safety sales tax has only grown 1.8 million. Is there any particular area of justice and public safety expenses that is it salaries, is it equipment, is it benefits? Is there anything that we can point to as being, okay, this is the big chunk that has caused this exponential growth?
That's something I would have to do a little more digging into. My guess, based on all our other expenditures and where growth comes from, is the personnel and benefits, but that's just a guess right now. I would have to do a little more digging and an analysis on that.
And just to add to your question and your research, is that increase tied to the decrease in fines and fees? Like, are we just picking up new costs that we didn't before have to because fines and fees used to cover it?
No, that's specifically just expenses, so revenue is not, well, besides the public safety sales tax revenue, that expenses is just expenses. It does not take into account fines and fees.
Mr. Farney.
Along those same lines, though, I know that Circuit Clerk McGrath has mentioned that there was a significant drop in fines and fees after various state laws were passed. Is there any way that you could get us numbers on that so that we could see the impact of Springfield's legislation on counties is?
Yes, it's something I can't share with tonight, but it's something that I am working on as a side project to put some stuff together on that.
Yeah, Mr. Ammons.
Thank you all. I feel like a county board member. All right. Don't. So, Travis, my question goes back to my public comments. Those of us who have to balance our budgets at home, if I don't know what I spent last month, how am I supposed to know whether or not I'm gonna have a deficit or a surplus this month? So if we don't have a trial balance and an audit hasn't been done, can you please explain to me how we have accurate projections?
Yeah, so for example, for FY '25, we've almost spent, or almost everything has been entered into Munis already. There's a few things that haven't been, and calculations are made to project those based on historic numbers for the final month, kind of where we are trending for the first 11 months, those kind of things. Another point of clarification is there are multiple ways and formulas to calculate fund balance. There's the audit fund balance, there's budgetary fund balance, and for best practices from IGFOA, finance organizations, setting policy based on budgetary fund balance is what you should use because it correlates better to cash flow. So for example, our policy is 16.7%. That equates to 2 months of emergency cash flow. So we know what we're spending throughout the year. We know what's budgeted, what's expected to be spent. So that's how budgetary fund balance is calculated.
So you don't have to have a trial balance to know what you have? You just go off the historical data?
No, the current data and forecasts. So I'll be doing my forecast in March or April, I don't remember, and I'll be going out 5 years on that, based on historical trends, economic environment, state laws that have changed, all kinds of things are all wrapped into that.
So in the recent past, I would say 25, 24, 23, in my time being here, I've heard it said, even back when Tammy was here, that there was concerns about a shortfall, and then we would end up in the year with a surplus. So the projections are not concrete, they're just projections based upon historical trends.
Based on a lot of things, but correct. Projections are projections. They're not set in stone. No one has a crystal ball. There had been reasons for like 21, 22. We got ARPA money to help with things. There was higher than expected vacancies back in 23. But if you look at 25, which is on this slide, I think we're projected at a $2.7 million deficit or right around there. And those are more concrete numbers because 25 has almost all been entered into Munis.
And the last one for me, you all, is when I look at the structural deficit, that's a whole nother question I have because I don't know what a structural deficit is. I get lots of different definitions as to what that is. But it looks like from 22 to 23, the expenses decreased. Can you explain what that is? Or why that would be?
It could be multiple things. I would have to look a little bit, but a lot of times there could have been capital projects, large projects. We had a 22 bond, so some of the initial expenditures could have hit in 22 and then not had to do those again in 23. If I look at my one of the handouts that are in this, we can kind of break it, look down to, which year was it, between 21 and 22?
Looks like
22 and 23. So it looks like the biggest drop was in services, so, the biggest drop was in interfund expenditures, which would have been related to the debt and construction.
And just to add, in the services category, that was when we were using ARPA money to pay for a lot of software and other infrastructure stuff. So the point being to stop pulling from the general fund and to use the ARPA funds at that time frame. In 24, I believe, was the last year that we used ARPA funds for those kinds of costs, because we wanted to get them back onto the budget so we knew what that would feel like.
So then it would have continued down all the way into 24 then, right? Because it didn't do that. It's just 22 to 23, and then it starts to go back up. So what you just said was.
No, so like, we paid for a lot of implementation, and then we also paid the next year. So 24 would have been like the license year. 23, 22 would have been the implementation and all those costs, all that kind of stuff. So it was gradually declining, and 24 was our.
So then we will have, you said all this stuff has been entered for 25. So we have a trial balance for 25?
No, not everything has been entered. Most things have been entered. We're still entering things. The trial balance will happen when we start working on the 25 audit. That usually happens a year after the following year. The 24 one, we're even further behind, but we will. That's one of the final steps in the audit process, is the trial balance.
I appreciate this opportunity to at least participate from this space. You all know that I have come to this board on numerous occasions, fighting as hard as I possibly can to bring in grant money, well over $1 million, maybe $2 million by now in grant funding, as well as trying to make sure that these vendors are not getting too much out of us. I don't want to go too far with my statements, but I try to do the best that I can to make sure that we get fair prices for the services that we get or the products that we receive from them. So it's concerning to me, because I think that we have a duty and a responsibility as department heads to spend the money in a way that's necessary for staff to get what they need, but also responsible for the taxpayers. And I would be remiss in certainly not being true to myself when I see large sums of money being spent. Well, how about $300,000 in bonuses? Okay, how about $60,000 for one person that I would never do as a department head, especially if I have another option that I could spend $10,000 or $15,000 and save the county $40,000 or $50,000. I wouldn't do those types of things because I think that's irresponsible. So I'm disturbed and I'm concerned when the people are coming to me saying that I'm going to have to cut services or cut personnel when I'm bending over backwards, try to do the best that I can to make sure I spend the money that I get in a responsible way. And then I see others spending it in a way that I don't deem to be responsible and not very responsive. So I'm a little upset about all of that, but I want to be clear that I'm always willing to play ball and to work with the county. When I first got here, we were asked to give back money. I was one of maybe 2 departments who gave money back at the end of the year when Tammy asked for it. I don't have a problem with that. I want to be responsible with that. But I want to make sure that everyone's doing the same thing and not just 1 or 2 departments. Thank you.
Travis, do you want to walk us through the detailed budget summary that the documents that you've given us? And then, yeah, we'll.
So in the handouts, I will kind of explain them. I don't have anything specific to go over with them, but there are 3 documents that you would have received. One is the blue and white table, and that is basically the general fund rolled up into summary categories from 2018 through 25, plus the budgeted amounts for 26. 18 is when the county started Munis, so that's why it goes back to 18. No other reason than that. The other one that goes along with that is at the top, it's called, it has the 1080 general corporate, but it's more detailed. It's the same report, but it breaks down these summary categories by a more detailed object code. So property taxes, you'll see the property taxes, the back taxes, the payment in lieu of taxes, penalty on taxes, and mobile home taxes. So it just gives historic information. The final one of those three is also blue and white. It's called the Year-to-Date Available Budget Report. Recently, during the cows, I've started to include a new year-to-date summary report that gives a breakdown of where we are spending throughout the year. This is what that is, except with more detail. It gives a breakdown all the way down to the object codes, not just like the summary codes. So it's, for example, the general fund, and then by department. So the first page, you'll see it's general fund, the county board department, and then all the object codes in it. And on the right hand, the very right-hand column is the percentage that has been spent through on each object code so far in FY25. That's what those three documents are. Is there anything specifically you want me to talk about, Ellie, or?
Just want to give like an example. So, I mean, this is giving you the details. So if you really want to dig in deep, if you have a question, I turn to the public defender. So I'm just going to, and she's not here, so I'm going to use her as my example. But if you want to know how much she spent on office supplies, you can see that level of detail with this report.
And again, a summary version of this report it has been included in, I think, the last 2 cow packets, and it's something I'm planning on doing going forward every month. It just doesn't go quite into this detail.
Mr. Thorsland.
Just to clarify, this year-to-date available budget report is for 25, which is finished, right?
It is for 25. There are still items being added to December for 25 costs, so these are not fully finalized. I'll give you an example. The final payroll, the first payroll in January had both 25 and 26 expenses, so we're working on doing a breakdown to move all of it went to 26 when the payrolls ran. We're going to be doing the breakdown to move the 25 portion into the 25 fiscal year. So it's, a lot of it's in there, but it's not fully finalized yet.
Ms. Harris.
Maybe, okay, not going to say it's a bad question. What is an encumbrance? It's on the budget.
So an encumbrance is basically money that we have committed to spend in that fiscal year, a lot of times through a purchase order, a PO. So we have a PO to a vendor that has authorized the purchase, but we're still waiting for the service to be done or the item to come in to pick up. So the encumbrance still affects the amount spent because it's already been committed.
Ms. Rogers.
I don't expect this to fix the budget, but it might help. Can we get a list of the fees that we currently have and see what fees we could possibly raise? I don't think it'll fix anything, but it might help, and I think that'd be helpful for us to see where if the marriage license hasn't been raised for, 10 or 20 years and it's $30, I don't know how much it is, and we want to go up, I'd be open to discussing something like that.
Yes, I will work, we have fees through different departments, so I will have to work with certain department heads, including Mr. Ammons, about certain fees. But yes, that's something that is a good idea to do. When I worked at the city, I did a fee analysis, and it's something that's a good idea to do instead of waiting 20 years to figure out and make changes. So yes.
Mr. Thorsland.
On that topic of fees, in ELOC, for what Ms. Monty talked about, we wanted to raise the waste hauler fee. And we raised it because it was extraordinarily low. And we found out there was a state law that prevented us going as high as we wanted to go. We had a cap on it. I forget the exact numbers, but we weren't able to jump to what was still a very reasonable per truck, if you imagine what they charge to pick your bin up. But it was, so we have to, when we look at fees, we have to then dig into the state laws or county laws that govern that, because sometimes fees are capped for other reasons besides the evil of PTEL. And we can't always raise them as much. But certainly, if there's ones that haven't been looked at in a long time, I think we did something with animal control and raised a few of those because they were pretty old.
Yeah, I agree the fees would be useful to see. The other piece of paper on your desk is revenue increase options. We've gone through these as a board many times. Obviously, we have our referendum non-binding on the March ballot, so we can discuss the revenue side of things more after we get feedback from the public. But I do want to say, in terms of fees, I don't think raising fees would ever raise the amount of money that, say, raising property taxes would. Plus, the people paying are, if we want to talk about who's paying, right, that hits everybody, whereas property taxes doesn't hit everyone. So just something to keep in mind. Ms. Furtado.
Yeah, I wanted to point out just a few things. And this, I think, first one is a question for Travis. It's super important that when you look at the county budget, that you center the general fund in the count. Like, you have to look at these funds and understand how they operate. You cannot collapse everything into one analysis. That just doesn't work. You have to look at the general fund and its health, and then it in conversation with the public safety sales tax fund and its health. The other funds are super important, and we get to do a lot of really, but they are very limited, and they all have sets of rules, right, on what you're allowed to do from them, and all sorts of strings attached to them. So when you're looking at a general fund deficit, that should be incredibly concerning. I think the two most important things that were said here is that last year, we propped up the general fund by taking $1.8 million from public safety sales tax and moving it to CARF, which is the only way that we were able to kind of keep up with our capital in any way that was meaningful. If you've been on this board long enough, you know that we inherited a disaster over the last 10 years. I mean, the equipment that the clerk inherited, like, you couldn't run an election on it. The downtown jail roof was caving in. Every software system we had was antiquated. So if we start falling behind on preventative maintenance and, capital asset replacement, we're just going to end up back there, right? So we moved that $2 million to prop up CARF. This year, go ahead, Travis.
I just want to make a real quick clarification. Everyone on the board knows this, but the $2 million transferred to CARF were for public safety specific capital, not just any capital. I just want to clarify that.
Because that's by law, like by statute, that's the only thing you could do. But as you know, public safety is a significant portion of our budget. This year, going into 26, we again took $2 million from public safety. It's not like it's a piggy bank, right? It had built up, but the rate at which we're spending public safety sales tax to prop up the general fund budget is just absolutely not sustainable. It's bonkers, right? So, like, it's a Band-Aid. Now, the other thing is, I do think that there's a lot of, I keep hearing like, oh, there's projections, and then the projections aren't, they don't come true. So a few things. One, the leveling the playing field was a very big deal. The other thing that Travis didn't mention, because it's impossible for us to know how much money we got because of the really kind of strange way the state statute was written, is right about that same time we started receiving cannabis money. There had been a lot of conversations about what we could do with that cannabis money. We are not by rule allowed to know how much of our sales tax is generated by cannabis until we have over a certain amount of dispensaries in our county. 5, yeah. So we saw a bump in sales tax. We see this bump in sort of sales tax revenue that's being driven by public safety, being driven by leveling the playing field, is also being driven, right, by the cannabis money. Now, those are two, one could argue, like sustainable, or like, I don't think anybody's gonna stop smoking weed in this county soon, right? So sustainable things. But then there were some things that were just like inexplicable, and that personal property replacement tax. I mean, I was in meeting after meeting after meeting, and we were like, why are we getting so much money? This makes no sense. And yeah, it was because the state just made a mistake. And so that was like a false, you saw our revenues go way up, and that was false. There was also, you saw we received the opioid money, and we put that into the general fund, and it was restricted, but people don't understand what that means. So they're like, look at how high your general fund is. And we're like, yeah, some of that's for a very specific task. You can't just use it for anything, right? So we segregated that out to a separate fund to make it more transparent. We had 2 years of just historically understaffing. I mean, we in our section on policy and personnel, we would look at those charts, and some of it a little bit was driven by the fact that we had so few we had a significant dip in correctional officers, in part because we were constructing, right, the jail. If you are paying attention, and I really hope that everybody is, when you're looking at those charts, we're doing much better now on actually staffing our county. The different elected officials work really, really hard to tell us, hey, this is the amount of staff that we need. Our budget model shouldn't be, hey, I hope 10% of them just don't get filled, right? And that's how we're going to balance the budget. The two driving reasons in 24 and 23 and 24 that we didn't go over budget was because of staffing shortage, because we just had staff that weren't there. That is also not a sustainable way to run a county, because the staff that we do have are all just going to get burnt out. If we are fully staffed, the numbers just don't number, and it's just not even close. And I mean, all you have to do is just go back and look at audit after audit after audit, and you could see that it isn't going to work. And I think we, as a board, we need to talk about how do we nibble at the edges. Maybe we raise them, but we also, a structural deficit means that nibbling at the edges isn't going to fix it, right? That is the situation that we're in. I think there's a lot of forces that drive that. PTEL is the number one force that drives that. Some of the decisions that have come out of Springfield, decisions that I support and I think are the right thing to do for people, they're not the right thing to do for numbers. Travis, looking at and I am hesitant to say this because there is on the general fund, you can look at how fines have dropped. It's 46% between 2018 and 2025. Although we did work really closely with the clerk to segregate out and keep rights. I believe she's keeping some more of those fines in those specific funds. So my guess is that dip is not entire, that part of it is how certain monies end up. But that, I'd be very curious, because if that's the truth, 46% drop in fines, that's huge.
I think it might actually be higher, because wasn't the agreement that she was keeping more of fines in her special revenues and transferring less to the general fund?
Yeah. But that, I think in that case, in order to understand how fines and fees works on the general fund, we would need an analysis that also looks at the changes in those. I believe it was 2 or 3 particular funds that she kept. But anyway, I'm sorry, I know I talk a lot, but I'm not actually that sorry. I'm not actually sorry at all. I teach women to stop talking. I teach women's leadership, and I say, we watch these videos about stop apologizing, and then the first thing I do is I apologize. So I need to stop doing that. But I just wanted to give some of those overview comments. And when we look at these numbers, I think it's important to do a granular analysis, but also to understand that the landscape analysis, and I think our elected officials and our department heads should be commended. I mean, they, try to turn over every rock to try to find additional funding, but at some point, there's no more rocks, right? And we have to actually make real decisions about the level of service that we're going to provide versus the amount of revenue that we have.
Can I make some some comments on that?
Yeah, go ahead,
So
Travis.
a couple of things that Stephanie talked about. In the email, I believe there was a link to the financial forecast from last year. In there, there's a breakdown of the 23-24 there's a paragraph about the personnel, the vacancies. There's a graph in there about PPRT that shows the huge spike. I think it went from like 900,000 to almost $3.5 million in like a year and a half, and how it's coming back down, and it's just over $1 million now, so it's coming back down. So those are in there, and there was one other thing that I was going to comment, but I don't remember what it was now, so.
Yeah, Mr. Ammons.
Couple of things. First of all, I really appreciate some of the things that you just shared, Stephanie, about nuanced things for those of us who don't see or not in the minutia of the budgeting process, to see some of the one-offs, things that are not consistent. So, but it did make me think about something that you said, Travis, about historical projections or historical data. So if we know that historically we're never fully staffed, I don't think there was a time that we've pointed to that I've heard you all discuss where the county was fully staffed. Then from a historical standpoint, we can kind of operate that we won't be fully staffed, right? So it kind of cuts both ways. But I could see us aiming for the high, right, the high end, and aim for the moon and land amongst the stars. I can understand that. And then I really appreciated, Dennis, Member Otta's, your question about encumbrance, because I think it's important for us to try to understand terminology if you're going to understand what the heck's being talked about in front of you, right? So that's why I have been asking for a definition of structural deficit that comes from the finance director, not from county board members or members of the public. Could you please give us a definition, a working definition for department heads and board members of what a structural deficit is?
Yeah, first I'm going to talk about the vacancies though. Starting in, I think, 23, after we had the county, it was before my time, so I don't know the exact date. After we had the historic vacancies, Tammy started to budget salary contra. So basically budgeting a reduction in salary to account for vacancies. And over time, every year, we kind of do an analysis and tweak that. So it's gone up. That particular reduction in the budget has gone up over the last few years to kind of account for those vacancies.
I want to get to Clerk Ammon's second part of his thing, but I want to reiterate that I think in that decision, that budgeting decision, which was a big deal, to not budget at 100% of projected salary costs, I think I probably had and I am not exaggerating, 10 conversations with Tammy about it. There is a sweet spot, at least in my understanding of conversations with her, is that if you budget too low, that the folks that look at your bond ratings and all that kind of stuff are like, oh man, they're just gaming the system. You know what I'm saying? And so she was really, really hesitant to do it because she didn't want to get away from true cost. You know what I mean? But it was something she internally debated. I mean, she would just call me up and be like, I think we're going to do it. And and I know, talked to other people in administration and stuff like that, talked, I'm sure, many times with Jim Goss. And then it was a gradual, she was like, all right, let's try doing it slightly less. So yeah, the budget that we're budgeting has not been fully staffed. And that was also part of the reason why sort of and I know this was also pretty controversial with a lot of department heads and stuff, is that the policy of hiring at the midpoint, you know what I'm saying? And that consideration of not bringing in people at the top of the range was also like part of that broader conversation that she and I had.
Travis, do you want to get back to the structural deficit?
Yeah, so structural deficit, just a very simple one-line explanation is actually on the slide right here. It is where your recurring expenditures are rising faster than your revenues. So you can see the trend line, the expenditures have a higher slope than the revenue slope. If you do a quick Google search, there's a paragraph about it that's actually really nice as well. It explains the difference between a structural deficit and a temporary one due to a downturn, where usually downturns, you can use your fund balance to get through them, but a structural deficit, you have to make structural changes in order to fix them. But in general, it's just your recurring expenditures are rising faster than the revenues.
Yeah.
Thank you. A working definition helps me, so now I won't stray from that the next time I bring it up. The question that I have is about investments. So I know we had a situation in the past where we could have recouped quite a substantial amount off an investment. In my automation fund, is it possible for me to work with the treasurer's office? Is it legal for us to invest those funds, or does it have to go through some other process?
Let Travis and Michelle take that.
You should, if you are interested in doing that, you should absolutely talk to the treasurer about that. I think the biggest decision point in an investment is cash flow. So if you are not planning to spend your automation fund in like a budget year, you should absolutely be talking to him at least about like a CD or something, because yeah, if you don't think you need it, then yes, it should be invested.
I just wanted to make sure that it was something that was within the bounds for us as department heads to go down that path. So I appreciate that. And the last comment for me is, if you all have been hearing my significant other and myself talk recently, there's a whole lot of money being spent up in Washington that we could use for different things. And I think all of us have seen some of that. So it's unfortunate that we end up scrapping over the crumbs that are left, and when we have trillions of dollars that are flowing through tax dollars, and 997 billion of that is being spent on military defense, $600 billion more than our highest competitor, second, which is China. And we all concerned about trying to make our budgets work and having to cut people. So, maybe if we can get some changes in DC, we can get some changes at the local level as well. Thank you all for your service as elected officials appointed to the positions or run for the positions. I know it's not easy, and I know I don't make it easy all the time, but it just makes everybody stronger. Thank you all for your service. I appreciate it.
Mr. Farney.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in. I think the circuit clerk has some funds invested, so you might even talk to her.
So let me just share a quick update on the budget planning process. Sure, go ahead.
So I just had a couple of specific lines, and if I'm confused by them, I'm sure other board members might be as well. So
Which report are you looking at?
So I'm looking at your 1080 general corporate, okay, comparing different years here. And some of this is before my time on the board, so if you could if somebody could fill me in on history, that would be great. But on the revenue side, permits, non-business, we had a peak of 2.8 million basically in 2022, yet this year it's only 742,000. What's the driving force behind that? And if you don't know that right now, you could share it with us, share it with the whole board as an answer or an email or something like that.
Yeah, that's something I'll have to get back to you on.
Okay. The other one that I had a question about, again, some of it started before my time on the board. When I'm looking at the different things here, we have a couple of things that show up starting in, it looks like 2022. Obviously, we know what the outside boarding was, but then we have right above that, there's a health, dental, vision, non-payroll line that comes. Is that something that was transferred to the general fund from another area? That would be 502041. It's near the bottom of page 3. It doesn't exist until '22, and this year it's $1.44 million. Would that have come from where it was somewhere else maybe, or?
Yes, I believe that used to be budgeted in a different fund until '22. I will have to pull up the budget. I remember reading the I can see the paragraph in my head, but I
Okay.
don't want to give you incorrect information. So there is a section in the budget that actually talks about that.
So, and I would assume that since that came over, there would have been a corresponding revenue increase somewhere as well to cover that if it was coming from a different fund.
Correct. There, yeah.
All right.
Since transitioning to Munis, we have significantly more ability to detail and break out. So I would say, we're even still to this day finding things where we're like, let's shift that out and create this kind of thing. So if you continue to see any more, emailing them over would be helpful because it'll just take a minute to research. But the vast majority of these are going to be going from AS400 to Munis and being able to actually customize a system that's informative has been really great for us.
And then my other question is, there was a significant drop in outside services going from at its peak in 2022 or 2021 at 1.5 million, and now we're only at about 120,000.
What number is that?
That is 502002.
I know outside services is one of the object codes that the auditor's office started reclassifying through other object codes over time, and that would have probably been in that timeline. But so that would have been reallocated probably over into multiple other object codes.
Okay.
Because as we got into Munis, the county started one way, and as time went on, changed how to code things, and outside services was one that they had worked on.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to say this for sure, but back to the thing about non-business permits. I know construction permits, I forget what we get, a third. It's like they pay so much and we keep a third. And there was, when it was Recorder Ingram, there was a couple of years where more than once in the year, we had to appropriate more money because Champaign was in such a building boom. And I mean, it was astronomical. We then started budgeting differently so that we didn't actually have to appropriate it. But all that money would just fall to the general fund. So I don't know for sure if that was it, but this timing would be when that was happening. So that might be one suggestion of what it could have been. And then you see the construction boom settle down.
Yeah, when I worked at the city, that is accurate with the construction boom around that time frame.
Yeah, I mean, he would just come and be like, okay, we have like 170,000 more than we thought. And then 3 months later, we got another 200,000 more than we thought. And we were like, this is great. But, there was a period of time when Champaign was one of the fastest growing cities in the world, or I mean, in the country. Like the Champaign County was one of the fastest growing, and that has obviously slowed down.
Hey, Ellie, did you want to talk about your one pager, or? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Or
No, I mean, I think that you have mostly covered everything on here through your presentation. We handed this out. Stephanie, did you have a comment on it?
I think I think it's important to talk about the stuff we know that's going on, but maybe also have a little bit of a conversation about the, like, Travis, what's keeping you up at night? You know, like, I mean, I think the healthcare cost is something that should be keeping us all up at night. And Ellie, I think this sheet is awesome, because I think it gives some like good big picture things. But is there anything else that, you know?
The healthcare costs are the big one, and that's not going down, and it's going to be really bad next time, I'm assuming, too, for the next near future. That one is probably I mean, that's our biggest, probably fastest growing expenditure. And yeah, that's that. And I mean, finding ways to bring in more revenue to keep the services we provide are the kind of two big things.
The health insurance, you know, we've nibbled off every edge that we can. We're doing an audit right now to make sure that everyone on our health insurance plan is legally supposed to be on our health insurance plan. And other than that, like there's just nothing left for us to do on our own aside from making our pool significantly healthier, which if we had the ability to do that, right, we're in the wrong business. So I'm very worried about this year's renewal negotiations because I just don't know what tools we have left at our disposal to try to bring down the rate increase that they're going to throw at us.
Michelle, is there any way that the county could join a larger pool?
We have looked into that, and we aren't healthy enough. They don't want us. We will drive their premium costs up. And that's the issue, right? So since Blue Cross Blue Shield took over our plan in 2018, 2017, they have lost money on us every single year because our claims are always higher than our premiums. They give us this chart every time we meet. We call it the red-green chart. And your red line is supposed to be well underneath your green line. Our red line is always way over our green line. I hate this chart. I see it when I close my eyes at night. I see this chart in my mind. And yeah, we've looked into joining a couple of different pools. We actually tried to actively engage one of them in negotiating with us. They took a look at our claims and said, try again in a few years if you get a little healthier. We have started having the conversations about self-funded because we could have a lot more control over the plan, but that is a huge, huge financial liability for the county. I don't know how we would confidently take that on, but we also might get to a point where our premium costs, not self-funded, are just so high that the financial liability of self-funded is worth the risk.
Ms. Vanish-Thiernan.
Thank you. I would like to note that this is not just a county problem. This is a nationwide problem of premiums just skyrocketing in the last few years, and it isn't necessarily even connected to the health of the insured population. My husband's company has cut costs, they've cut coverage, they've raised premiums, and they are flush with cash. They are fine, and they have a very young, healthy workforce. So this is not simply health-related. It is a nationwide, honestly, crisis at this point, that things are going up like average 16 to 20% year over year.
Ms. Erdes and then Mr. Thorsland.
I was wondering, in the year-to-date available budget report, can you define for me what professional services is? The report.
Yeah, I'm going to actually refer you to the other chart or the other graph in here or the other handout in here, the one that's labeled 1080 General Corporate. It's the one that has more detail. There is on page, one of the pages, there will be your services, personnel, commodities. Oh, professional services. I'm sorry, it's not broken down more. You did say professional services, is that correct? Yeah. So just in general, those are experts or professionals that the county pays to provide services. So I can give examples of it. Expert witnesses that the court uses, interpreter services, outside legal that isn't part of the state's attorney's office, anything from a expert or professional that the county has to hire to provide services.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering that because in the auditor section, there is a allotted amount for professional services, but none of it is used. Is that normal for that department?
So that was, you're talking about the auditor's budget for this
Year to date, yeah.
Yeah, that was probably allocated for like the actual auditor, external auditor, and we didn't really pay anything because they couldn't do the audit because nothing was ready.
Okay, thank you.
And I also just want to add one more thing on the health insurance. Our other biggest problem is that we are in a monopoly, and Carl completely controls the pricing. And we recently got some data that our individual single premium cost is 95% higher than the national average. So,
Mr. Thorsland.
Thank you for steering it back to that. Yeah, I'm going to do a Wilson. This is more of a comment than it is a question. I have advanced degrees. No, I don't. The health insurance is disgusting. I think it's disgusting. The costs are driven like a little snake eats tail. The insurance companies are willing to pay the providers these extraordinary rates. They rub each other's bottoms, and they just continue to just have amazing profit in a country where, as Aaron pointed out, we're spending trillions and trillions of dollars to shoot people in the street. And there goes another healthcare worker too. And we're victimized by it. And I was thinking about this self-insured, option. It would certainly make us all feel a little bit more, as county employees, maybe wanting to stay more fit, because it would have a direct effect, maybe more on them, more ownership of it. But I don't know, you could have one person, as you pointed out, Carl is, extraordinarily high. They're going to go there. You could have one person wipe out what we paid this year.
so one of the, and not to just go on too far of a tangent, but I do think that this year we will have to have a serious conversation about self-insured, so we might as well just kind of get it started. One of the biggest benefits to self-insured is we would be the entity negotiating with Carl on what we're paying for stuff, which as of right now, that's Blue Cross Blue Shield, and then we just pay whatever Blue Cross Blue Shield tells us to pay. So, that's the strongest motivation for considering that, is to be able to really customize our plan in a high level of detail. There's a lot of different things that we can do to incentivize employees to do significantly more preventative care, to choose the less invasive option, right? Have you been to convenient care before you went to the ER? Maybe we make that free, right? Like, if it's our plan, we can craft all of that. If we're just purchasing a plan off the shelf, we can craft minimal things on the sides, but nothing that's going to significantly save us money.
Yeah, just, anecdotally, my formerly resident alien spouse had to get a 1-month prescription filled for a thing that they've taken for 20 years, and went without insurance to Carl and spent 3 minutes, got a prescription. It was $1,800 for this visit. And when I contested it with Carl, if you find out about the medical codes, 2 of the codes were fake codes. They were internal Carl codes, and they just refused to tell me what they were for and happily dropped them. And that was $800 of the $1,800, and it was made up garbage. So if you're listening, Carl, screw you. You should be taxed, and we hate you all until we fall off a ladder, and then we need you. So don't take it all too seriously. But yeah, it might be a thing that we have to look at in the future because, looking at the premium costs, it's just extraordinary.
Ms. Furtado and then Chair Locke. Oh, sorry, Trev.
Sorry, there's just something else I want to throw in there too. Just last year or so, the county played our one card we had to reduce the rates and started an HRA, which we took the risk for a lot of it on instead of Blue Cross Blue Shield. But so instead of having a huge increase, it actually had a 5% reduction because we took on all that risk, but we cannot play that anymore. So that was a one-time thing.
And just again, if you're super into the numbers right now, the county did not take that 5% reduction. We passed the entire 5% premium reduction onto the employees. And we put almost $700,000 into the HRA fund.
And that was all from the general fund. Yes. Furtado and then Locke.
So one more thing I think that's super important to understand with historical trends, and is the thing that keeps me up at night, is when I first got on the board under the previous governor, so a lot of the revenue we get, the state collects it and then they give it to us, right? Property taxes we collect and we give it to everybody else, right? So particularly income tax under Governor Rauner, they just were like, you know what, we're keeping 10%. So like how the state tried to balance their budget was they just reduced the amount of income tax that they were going to pass on to counties and to local governments. Then under Pritzker, I think in the first year, he reduced it to 5%. And I think we now get everything. I'm not sure. But just remember that when the state wants to balance their budget, the first thing they come after is counties. It's harder, like I think politically, for them to come after cities. And so like the property taxes we get, right? These other taxes the state gets and then they give to us. And ultimately, if they decide to keep any of those taxes or change how they distribute them, they have that power to do so. The other thing is, outside of the fact that Carl is sole source, one thing that is weird about our county compared to other counties is a significant portion of our land is not taxed because the university and Carl own a significant part of this county. And we are the only county in our area that's under PTEL. So like we already were like behind the 8 ball for the number of folks that we have lived here because we do not draw property tax from a huge chunk of our pie. And then we put tax caps limits on top of that in 1996. So like if you want to understand a structural deficit, we are living with decisions that were made in the 1990s, right? And then the state deciding that Carl was not for profit made it even worse. But if I would argue there is no county in the state that could have suffered worse from passing PTEL than our county. It was like we just decided just to shoot ourselves in the foot and then shoot ourselves in the other foot.
Chair Locke.
I think I'm getting a message at my microphone here. I'll talk until it stops. You took most of what I was going to say. No, that's fine. I was going to say, like, we can't tax Carl, and they sure are. They do have us there. A cautionary tale for if we self-insure. And we'll just use me. Everybody in this room and everybody that's ever watched a board meeting knows I have MS. I'm very expensive. So just my regular, trying to stay as healthy as I am, not going to the ER, just my medicine is over $20,000 a month paid. And if I were an employee of the county and we were self-insured, there's just that. Add in other health complications of the last year. My personal insurance that blissfully comes through my husband's employer paid over $380,000 last year. Get 3 of me working for the county and we're self-insured. It's a lot. And I would just hesitate And I'd ask us to caution that. And then one thing we're not talking about that is also something that keeps going up every year is medical care at the jail. And we have to provide, we're constitutionally required to provide medical care. Judges aren't going to kick someone out just because they're ill, and that keeps going up, 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 up. So these are things that, even if we would change our health insurance, we would still have to consider the increasing going up forever and ever. And we should tax Carl, if only we could, if only we could. We really tried.
I want to say this. I think sometimes there's a perception, I've had people say this about me, like, oh, you're fear-mongering, or, oh, like I want to be real blunt. I'm like a wild and insane optimist. And I think this is a fiscal reality. I can have serious conversations with people that have different opinions about what we should do about this reality. People that will not admit that this county is structurally under a deficit. I just don't even know. It's like, I say this before, it's like you're not a serious person, right? There's 700 different ways you could look at the data. We are under a structural deficit. That said, that doesn't mean we can't do cool and wild and important things, right? It just means we need to plan it. I'm going to say this because Susan is probably one of my favorite former employees. I know we're not supposed to have favorite former employees, but she was amazing, right? We could still do, in this reality, we could still address the waste, right, that's going to be put into our water. We just have to plan for it, right? Like, we just have to come up, like, in the 90s in Indianapolis, in a city that, like, every year the Department of Parks and Recs got cut. They were like, no, we're going to build the best greenway system in the entire county. They came up with a plan. And every year they're like, here's the piece we're going to do. Here's the grants we're going to go after, right? I don't think at any time when I was there did our budget go up. It got cut in the middle of the year almost every single year. To this day, they have the most extent, best greenway system in the country. Because they came up with a plan, they came up with a vision, they said this matters to us, and then they came up with creative and innovative ways to fund it. We could still do things, but we have to fix the structure, continue to push the ball in directions that matter to us, but it's going to take planning and effort and cooperation.
So that's a great segue into planning. Oh, okay, Mr. Pugh.
I had a question on the back of this sheet. It says, what are ways the county could increase revenue? It says number 3, levy a facilities tax. But I'm looking over here, it says that's a referendum. Is that, but it doesn't say on this side, is that actually the same thing or different things, or is it?
I think it was meant to be the same thing, yeah. So I would refer to this more detailed revenue options sheet that we got
make sure
today.
it was, because it has different information. I want to make sure that was the correct. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree, we definitely need to plan well. And just an update on what has been going on. I know we've mentioned this before, but we're trying to start the budget planning process as early as possible. So we have already sent a budget planning questionnaire out to all department heads, asked them to return it by this Friday. And we're asking them questions about everything from, are they using our grants coordinator? How much do they depend on grants? To looking at things like how they handle purchasing, and then looking back at their individual departmental budgets over the last few years and looking at where they may have overspent or underspent, and then also asking them to think about potential cuts at various levels. And I think it was 2, 3.5, and 5% cuts. So we're collecting that information. We'll share it with all of you. And then we are starting to schedule meetings, individual meetings with each department, so that we can talk through their individual budgets. And I just want to throw out a couple of things to think about. Again, obviously we need to talk about revenue options, but I'm going to kind of table that a little bit for now because we are waiting to get feedback from the public, and we've also talked about it a lot. But in terms of making structural changes, so things that we can do as a county to address the structural deficit, which again is, we're talking about the general fund and to a certain extent, public safety sales tax fund. I think one of the big questions that we as a board will need to think about is if we're asking departments to make cuts, are we asking them to cut across the board, or are we going to treat each department individually? Personally, I don't think we can do across the board cuts. It doesn't make sense with the variability in departmental budgets and services and the like. But that is something that this board will need to think about. Something else to throw out there, we have departments who obviously are heavily part of the general fund, and then we have departments that are entirely or largely grant funded or funded through special revenue funds. Now, those funds are not impacted in the same way, but the structural deficit is not, they're not impacted in the same way, right? Maybe their grants get cut, that's a risk, but if they have a special revenue, that's coming from somewhere else, and then obviously their spending is restricted. But I think one thing that we can think about as a county is how all of these different funds are interplaying, and whether there's a way that we can have those special revenue funds and grants support the services that are provided by the county that are currently coming entirely out of the general fund. So everyone benefits from our IT services, everyone benefits from our legal counsel, from our HR, from our finance, from our facilities, right? These are all general fund supported, but departments that are grant funded are also using those. So those of you who have worked with grants know that sometimes you write in, right, a certain percentage that would go to support overhead or the like. So that is one structural adjustment that we could think about and obviously discuss with department heads. But I just wanted to throw those things out there and open it up for further suggestions, discussion, questions. Yes, Ms. Ayers.
I think that's a great topic to bring up is, I guess, services, because my main question at the moment, without having, read over what's legally possible or what's not, is similar to how last county board meeting we were able to stipulate how the county is going to help other municipalities with their yes, animal control. Thank you. Is there a way that, like you said, there's services here that the county provides that already generates revenue? Is there a way that there are other services, grant funded or not, that could be used for other municipalities that could generate revenue? And I'm not saying instead of cutting services, but I feel like if you cut services, wouldn't that hurt potential for revenue if that were possible?
Yeah, I'm going to turn that over to admin.
So I think just to draw the distinction, when I'm understanding Ellie's statement to say that when we're talking about services, we're talking about the internal services that the county provides to each county department and whatnot. So I think that we have had a very kind of organic growth in using grants, and we have a lot of grants that do not factor in administrative overhead. And with the grant coordinator position, that's something that we can work on cleaning up, which would be helpful. We have some level of billing in some situations for IT, custodial, maintenance, but it is definitely not consistent. I don't think it's market rate. I think we're still doing things at a very deeply discounted cost, and the county picks up, the general fund picks up the remainder of that cost. So I think there is absolutely a lot of room for a much more detailed conversation and calculations as to what are these things actually costing us, and how do we consistently require that they're built into a grant kind of situation. Does that kind of go at what you're thinking about?
Yeah, because I also love that you brought up like IT services, because one of the things that kind of generated this thought was, okay, RPC is now using our IT services. It would be very cool, like Ms. Portato said, if like IT services could be provided to other municipalities at cost.
So we do that. And so just for clarification for everyone too, RPC is a department of the county, and they were spending a significant amount of money to go out of the county to pay for IT costs. So I think that, it's a good thing that we've rectified that, and it has allowed us to expand our IT department, which benefits everyone in the county. We do provide IT services for other entities. We currently have the sanitation district. We recently added mental health board. The thing that I think we need to be really cognizant of when we do that is when you introduce the concept of profit to a government service, I think you change the dynamic of what the priority and the mission is. And if we're going to do that, we need to do it in a way where at no point is the service to the county departments compromised or placed second or not the priority, because that is our priority. We're the only ones that are providing that service to our county departments. It needs to be the best service that we could possibly do. So in order to pick up additional municipalities, I think we have to kind of do the equation of how much staffing does that require, and are we charging enough to either pay for the entire staffing that requires, and it takes nothing from our current staffing, or are we charging enough that we're getting, a person who is spending part of their time on this contract and then the rest of the time on county stuff. But then you need to factor in, so now we have another employee, so that is HR work, it's payroll work, it's health insurance work, it's finance department work, it's management work. So now someone's supervising this person. So there's so many hidden costs. And the more you expand and expand and expand this concept, the more costs you're contributing, right? So off the table, I just think it has to be so carefully thought through when right now we don't have a for-profit concept in what we do. And our focus now is all of our county departments. And this takes both of those things and challenges them, so.
To add on to that, I think a couple of the instances that we've seen recently is the animal control, and also our sheriff, right, covers some smaller municipalities that don't have their own police force. So it's more like we're stepping in where other municipalities don't have the capacity to do the job themselves, which is, I think, also the case with the animal control situation. I would just throw out there that I think that if Brookins is not sold and we have to tear it down, that we could build a huge solar field there and generate a lot of energy that would pay for the entire county's energy use. And I don't know, I hadn't thought about profit, but maybe at some point, right, selling it off. That's down the line and isn't going to solve the structural deficit. Furtado.
And one thing too is I think it's important to maybe make a clarification. The proposal isn't that the admin fees would all go to the grant coordinator, or that even necessarily would all be captured back into like central services like maintenance and stuff like that. Like what it could do is, if we were better, one of the things about grants is often to get a grant, it has to be like a new thing. You know what I mean? Or like, do you know what I'm saying? Which is fine, but then all it means is like, oh, that's one more thing for you to manage. And if you're not adequately capturing some so this is a way that if we had a more robust understanding of like administrative fees that we're leaving on the table, it could give relief to individual departments, right? Like individual departments, like, oh, I'm administering that grant, 3% of my salary, right, is offset by that, and that would be a big deal. It's just, we have never like done a study of like what fees are we leaving on the table. I mean, I think it's good because it means we're putting all our grant money towards serving people, but it also means anytime you get a grant, like we'll talk to elected officials that are like, yeah, I got that grant and now I got to administer that grant, right? And it's like a whole nother thing they've got to do. And there's nothing, it's not offsetting any of their time or anything. The other thing is I did want to mention one tiny little glimmer of hope. When you look at our bonds, we have 3 big bonds right now, right? We have the bond for Bennett, that is, and if anybody says, oh, you could pay those bonds off earlier and save money off the interest, that's not legal. That's not a thing. So if you hear people from the public will say that, and that's just not a thing. So you cannot recall them until certain dates. And it's, hopefully none of us will be on the board anymore. But we do have 3 bonds. So the Bennett bond isn't done. It's a 20-year bond. So we're talking 20, I don't know, 40, 20.
Yeah, it's like 20 years out from 2020 or something.
Yeah, so it's a ways out there. Yeah. And then the jail bond is done by 2036. You could call it a little bit earlier than that. But the courthouse bond ends in 2028. We're still paying off the last time we did the courthouse. Now, the thing is, what we're paying on the jail is real low right now because we're all basically just paying interest because we're paying the court bond. Once we pay the court bond, then we're going to actually start paying principal on the jail bond. But there is a gap there, so we will get, the public safety sales tax will get between like $500,000 and $750,000 more once after 2028. So that's one tiny, like, it's one of the only things that's made me okay with borrowing so much money from PSST, is there is some relief coming to that fund after 2028.
Michelle?
I just want to add that as we all are thinking about what this looks like long-term, it's not just the structural deficit, right? It's that we need to be able to keep up with living wage, cost of living. All of our departments, I think, are understaffed. Like, everyone needs more help. Government issues are becoming more complex every day. We need to be able to send staff to training. We need to be able to have redundancies, be people that are trained in backups, and all of that just takes more time, more money, more people. It takes more. So it's not just that we need to fix this issue. We have to figure out a way to get ahead to some degree and get into a better long-term place, because I see how much our staff work. I think the courthouse is as busy on the weekend with staff as it is during the week, because they have to. They don't have time to handle their caseload during the week. I regularly I hear from other people, I see it in the timesheets, they're working evenings and weekends because they want to get the work done, and we haven't built in the structural capacity for their job to be manageable in a work week. So it's not just this current problem, it's getting better than this current problem is what I would hope our goal would be.
Mr. Thorsland?
Been looking at the increase options for revenue, and all of them, of course, are referendums. We know what happened the last time we tried a referendum. We even tried to promote that. One that looks like it might be an easier sell is the Veterans Assistance Levy, because, it's like revenue for puppies. It's hard to be against that, and we do have this liability from the Veterans Assistance Fund that's a state mandate. It's a big budget item sometimes. That's a thing that would help. I really think if we did a better job of explaining PTEL to the general public and not have the Chamber of Commerce and the Farm Bureau immediately start a giant ad campaign against raising our taxes, those damn government people. If people understood what that does, that it's not coming from them, that it comes from this big pool that we leave on the table because either the limit of the rate or the whole thing in general, and got that passed, that would be one of these big changes that we could get. How to sell a tax increase because that's how it's going to be framed almost immediately. You know, the news gas bag's going to be running around, Jim Dye's going to. I really think if people understood how that worked and how it affects them and how it affects the services that they get and everything else, I think that would be helpful to get rid of. The public safety sales tax, I don't understand why it didn't. I know people ran against it, but it was really stupid because they're going to turn right around and complain that they don't have enough deputies, that Dustin can't serve their area fast enough. The other thing that you talked about, Stephanie, you're a U of I person. You're a U of I person. My ex-department had their grant funds at one particular point doged to death 72%, but the money we did get, the university went, thank you, that we take half now, and left us with like basically nothing. And we don't build that into our grant structures. And you're right, there's an administrative cost. When somebody gives you a pile of money, you have to do things with it that cost money to do. So, and it's something we should think about. It's not big. You talked about training. I went through, because you inspired the inner nerd for me to get my little ruler here. Conferences and training is like one of the most underspent little line items. It's not going to make anybody rich because it's not a whole lot of money, but that seems to be the one that nobody's really doing anything with, including the board. There's a couple other things in here, but there is no solution going through this thing. You know, that's why I asked if this is all the way complete yet, because there is, if you added it all up, there's a little bit of money in there that could go back to the general fund. The other thing I don't know that much about is there's a lot of ARPA stuff still out there that's not done yet that we want to make sure that we bring back in if it's not going to happen. And I'm particularly angry with some of the people that really stuck their hand out and really wanted it, and they haven't done anything with it yet. And there was big arguments that we need it, we need it, we need it, we need to do something. Well, if you're listening, poop or get off the pot, because it's time to do that now, or we want the money back. And we need to really quickly figure out what we can do with it, and maybe that's a small help, because that's not an insignificant amount of money that's sitting out there. And then there's that little bit of interest that we have from it too, which I think is not that little either. So, and I'm babbling all this because I have to leave at 8 o'clock. But that's my input on the revenue side. I think we really need to try to sell some referendum that would work. How to sell that, I'm not a PR person, because it just makes sense to me to get rid of it, but you have to make other people realize that it just makes sense to get rid of PTEL.
Mr. Pugh.
Thank you. Actually, on the Veterans Assistance Levy, 0.03%. On a $100,000 house, that's what, about $30, roughly speaking? Okay. Just want to make sure of that, but yeah, I think the Veterans Assistance Levy is probably the only thing that'll actually pass with huge amounts of everything going behind it. You said puppies, you know, people like veterans. Democrats, Republicans, Independents, everybody likes veterans, they'll do it. They just need to know how much it's going to end up being, pretty much. But I think the veterans for us right now is what, about $150,000, $200,000 we spend on that? Or how much is it, right around there?
Sorry, what?
The VAC, how much we spend on that right now, roughly?
On the VAC?
It's like $150,000.
Yeah.
And 0.03 is like almost $1 million.
But it would be restricted.
It would
That's what I'm saying, though, but that at least, it's a small bit, if nothing else. It's something that actually has a good chance of passing, nothing.
Well,
Yes,
just for reference, when we did the public safety sales tax, we specifically said it would be supporting veterans assistance because it would free up other money, and that didn't seem to resonate, so.
That did not come across very well out there. This is literally called the Veterans Assistance Levy, and that'll be a lot different, I think, out there.
I agree that's the most, the low-hanging fruit. I don't think it would solve any of our financial issues. Yeah, Steve.
Regarding the VAC levy, we're not spending that much I think we're spending significantly more than we were a few years ago. And were that referendum to pass, it's just going to have a minuscule effect on our budget because we're not providing $3 million now.
And I get that, but every little piece helps right now, I think. And this is something we could actually literally do. And that's why I wanted to say that. And once again, they can come back to us, as was told many times by Stephanie, they can come back to us and ask for a whole lot more money if they want to at any time. So at least they would be sidelined in the future for any of these budget. Thank you.
I think there's actually been some court cases on that where they don't necessarily have the ability to ask for that anymore. There's been, I forget which county it was. I don't know if Steve.
Maybe Peoria.
Yeah.
Or the Sangamon. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Steve.
Regarding the ARPA funds, my office is already reaching out to different entities that we've provided funds for to try and get a firm number on when they're going to have those funds expended. As far as long-term assistance to the county with that, though, it's one-time money. And what we have is a structural deficit, and one-time money will slow things down a little bit, but it's not going to fix the problem that we have.
Steve, I believe we discussed last week, do you need a directive from this board asking to give ARPA recipients a deadline to, if they haven't spent or started spending the money by a certain date, then we're absolutely taking it back?
That would be helpful, yes.
Okay, we'll try to get that on an agenda. Anybody else? Going once?
I guess thinking about next, so we're going to do the referendum. I know my seatmate and I have already decided that we're going to do something like in our district to talk to constituents about it. I encourage other people to do so as well. We're just pinning down a date in February. And I think at this point it's worthwhile to wait till after that. But I think it would be good to do another one of these studies, or is that the plan, is to kind of continue with these study sessions? I know we also have the budget process that also, but this is a big conversation to have on top of board meetings.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely talk about scheduling additional study sessions. I think it's all of our jobs to do what you just mentioned between now and March 17th, and that is to make sure that our constituents have the information that they need. And we're going to be meeting with department heads mostly in March, so it may make more sense to wait on another study session until after those meetings have taken place. But yes, I agree. It's a big agenda item that we can't really cover in the regular meetings, so we'll think about a schedule for that. Mr. Thorsand?
Yeah, one more just about meetings. We always schedule a study session every month on the calendar, on the website. The calendar is still the 2025 calendar. So we do have them if we think of something else we want to talk about before then, but I agree we should wait to see what we get from this particular thing, give us an idea which way the wind is blowing.
And, reach out amongst ourselves, like what is most helpful for you all at this point? Are these documents helpful? If you have questions, follow-up questions, obviously some of these are very detailed. Reach out to Travis, reach out to members, former finance chair, willing to answer questions. I'm going to volunteer her. But yeah, I mean, let us know what you think would be most helpful for the board moving forward to have a good understanding of the situation and the choices we have. Okay, I think I'm going to hand it back to Chair Locke.
Right. I think we've gone through everything. Does anybody have any other business related to this study session tonight? Seeing none, I call this meeting adjourned at 7:57.